passage, this bit of scripture will sound familiar, especially to Richard, since he read it at John's service. It's Psalm 139, portions of it, about God and God's care. Oh God, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path, my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, oh God, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's so high that I cannot attain it. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. That I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me before they existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. So ends the reading of God's holy word.
Thanks be to God.
Invite us to pray. Gracious, holy God, we listen to this ancient prayer, ancient and yet timeless prayer that speaks of your complete and everlasting love for all of us. May it indeed comfort our souls and bring lightness of being to our spirits in these days as we rest upon your care, your deep love for each of us. Amen. Around this time of year, roughly speaking, students at many levels in many places are finishing up exams. And since my last exam was now about 30 years ago, I can speak about these things without undue hardship and trauma. Because for many of us, exams were a fairly troubling experience, to say the least. It is, in my mind, an examination kind of a compressed moment when the student is often expected to regurgitate a ton of information in a very short time. Hopefully before said information leaks out one of the ear canals. What is needed in many of these examinations is a well-reasoned, cogent response to the examination question. A response that covers all aspects of the issue, is sprinkled with copious facts and dates and concepts, while of course remaining succinct and concise. And these tests are meant to assess our understanding. Although I gotta say, in my case, most times they simply felt like the admission price to summer. And too often I found essay questions in particular to be more a test of my creativity than my knowledge. As the expression goes, somewhat modified for this setting, if you can't dazzle them with details, at least baffle them with baloney. There's a time and a place for everything. Then there are the multiple choice questions, which for some of us became an exercise in gambling. So whether it was essays or multiple choice, the fallback strategy for the struggling student might be described as a mix of rambling and gambling. And Exams are perhaps some of the most intense moments of assessing our knowledge, but we're challenged all the time on that front, I think. And the more enamored our culture becomes with information, the more we seem to be challenged. For example, how many times have you and I been asked to provide a password that we probably selected back in the 90s and carefully wrote down on a piece of paper that's long since recycled? Maybe it's because I'm kind of tired of all the emphasis on knowing that I find Psalm 139 so comforting. I find it deeply reassuring that, first of all, God is the one who truly knows. And secondly, in the grand cosmic scheme of things, we are no more able to know it all than we're able to count the grains of sand on a beach. In my mind, it sort of takes us off the hook. Not only do we not need to know, we can't, but God does. Most importantly, God knows you and me. And I'm counting on it. Because my efforts to know myself are not especially stellar. Not that I won't try. In the course of a year, I spill a whole lot of ink in my journals about God knows what. Half-baked theories about life, an awful lot of weather reports, accounts of the day's activities, and then questions. The questions. So many questions. Probably the same questions now that I was asking 30 years ago in some cases. Some of those questions just don't do me the courtesy of going away. And so I keep asking them. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I've referred to before, in prison, waiting to be executed by the Nazis in 1945, wrote a whole lot of prose and he wrote a whole lot of poetry as well. One of those poems ended this way. He wrote, "Who am I? They mock me, these lonely questions of mine. Whoever I am, thou knowest, O God, I am thine." Of all the things to know, I guess it seemed most important to know that he was God's. And I guess there's not much more important, even if we can't remember our passwords. Over at M.M. Ewing, my other office, I run into people who have enjoyed keen intellects for much of their lives, but their strengths now lie in other areas. They can't know quite the way they used to, but they can enjoy being known at this point in their lives and inviting others to do that. And so they challenge me sometimes as to what I value most. What do I find most important? For example, if I go sit down with one of my friends over there at Ewing and begin to spout the temperature and the relative humidity and the latest Dow Jones stock report, their eyes will start to glaze over, as well they should. But what they do respond to, and I think this is really true, most of us, is kindness and a warm smile, touch on the hand perhaps, maybe a bit of laughter or a song, whatever helps them to know, really know that they are dearly loved. And that's the sort of knowledge that can make a person's day, whether you live in Ewing or not. Does it in a way the stock report just doesn't have the same effect. As Maya Angelou put it, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And we don't have to know a lot about a person to help them feel loved either. In fact, sometimes I think knowing may get in the way. Unlike God, who knows all of us completely and perfectly, I often see others through rather distorted lenses. Maybe just seeing the exterior of the person and assuming that's all there is. I officiated at 2 memorial services in the last couple of weeks. two men named Robert with vastly different life stories, vastly different externals. But as I reflected on these two men, it struck me that as different as they seemed on the outside, they shared a very similar spirit of kindness and compassion towards others. Just goes to show I don't know nothing. And yet, in this information age, we can sometimes think we know it all. And our little technological gizmos can encourage that illusion. My nephew and his wife have one of those cool little computer contraptions that allows them to stand in their kitchen up in Saranac Lake and ask the computer to answer all sorts of esoteric questions. It was amazing. I stood there munching their potato chips, somewhat in awe as I beheld this miracle of technology. And for a moment I flashed to the Enterprise. I am expecting Leonard Nimoy to come around the corner. These days, information is at our beck and call. And it's simple, relatively speaking, to find out the capital of Peru, or the height of the tallest building in Denver. Maybe Lynn knows. What's not so easy is to learn what matters most to the person sitting next to me. The sort of precious knowledge that God possesses. But then again, maybe we don't always want to know. It's risky to know something precious and private about someone else. Because once we know, we carry a sacred trust, something very precious. So do we really want to know? I know about the ambivalence about knowing. I've had a fantasy of one day somehow chartering a submarine and cruising the deeper parts of Canandaigua Lake, some of which are reputed to be nearly 275 feet down. And part of me is curious to see what sort of fish live down there and whatever else, not to mention the tractors at the bottom of the lake, both John Muir International, I'm sure. But aside from not having a submarine readily on hand, what keeps me from pursuing this dream is the fear that once I know, I'll never touch a toe to that lake. And it takes me back to what you know I'm going to talk about years back when Jaws came out. Reasonable, sane, intelligent people were reluctant to dive into these freshwater lakes, hundreds of miles from the nearest shark. Amazing the power of Hollywood. So what we think of as knowledge in any given moment can be distorted by our emotions, even if you haven't just seen Jaws. And that distortion gets at things like racism, ageism, sexism. So I'm thrown back upon prayer, asking God to, first of all, cleanse my knowledge. And secondly, remind me what I most need to know. That at the end of the day, or the end of a life, I am still with you. Oh God, and you are still with me. So whether or not you happen to know the capital of South Africa, or the height of the Empire State Building, or even the number of pieces you can carve out of a Wegmans sheep birthday cake, what matters most is to know that God made you with love, and God made you for love. I'll conclude with a quote from a very unusual philosopher, perhaps, a man by the name of Jimi Hendrix. He wrote, "Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens." Wisdom, I would add, listens for the God within us and listens for the God in others. And I guess that's about all I know.